You're not tired because you're lazy. You're tired because you've never been taught where enough actually is. So every finish line just becomes the starting point for the next one. There's a Swedish word for the fix, and once you understand it, you'll never chase satisfaction the same way again. The word is lagom. Not too much, not too little, exactly enough. And today, I'm giving you the real method behind it. Not the candle and blanket version sold in lifestyle books, but the actual mechanism that lets an entire culture stop treating more as the automatic answer to feeling unsatisfied. I'm Danish myself, not Swedish, so let me be upfront. Lagom belongs to Sweden. My own culture has a close cousin of it. We call it tillpass. Both words are pointing at the same target. And one popular, if debated, story traces lagom back to an old Viking custom. A drinking horn passed around a group, each person expected to take just enough for everyone else to still get a fair share. True origin or not, that's the actual spirit of the word. Enough isn't a compromise. It's a form of respect for the people around you and for your own limits. Here's the part I want you to sit with, because it's the whole engine behind this video. Busyness and satisfaction were never actually connected the way you've been assuming. More effort doesn't reliably produce more contentment. Contentment comes from something else entirely. Accurately recognizing when you've already arrived instead of treating every enough as just another stepping stone. And I'm going to show you exactly why your brain keeps failing to register that arrival, plus the specific two-step way lagom gets applied daily that finally broke this pattern for a client of mine. Stay with me, because that part is coming up right after I tell you who I am and why I know this. Quick note before we go further. What you're hearing is built from documented cultural research and real Nordic practices around moderation, filtered through my own professional experience, my honest interpretation of it, not a strict formula offered for education and entertainment. I'm Freya Holm. I grew up in a small fishing town on the Danish coast, daughter of a teacher and a fisherman, in a house where tillpass wasn't a philosophy anyone announced. It was just how much of anything you took, ate, bought, or said. I trained as an interior designer in Copenhagen, and for 8 years I organized homes for urban families. One client stays with me more than almost any other, successful by every visible measure, mid-30s, on our third closet reorganization in 2 years, who told me, almost as an aside, that she couldn't remember the last time she'd actually felt done with anything, not finished a project and felt satisfied, just moved straight to the next thing, exhausted, with no sense of having landed anywhere. Her closet mirrored it exactly. Full of things bought to solve a feeling that buying never once actually touched. That's the trap I'm about to walk you through, piece by piece. Why effort and satisfaction got disconnected in your head in the first place, and the specific daily practice that reconnects them. If any of this is already landing for you, go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you're new here. This channel exists to hand you the real system behind Nordic living, not another productivity method demanding more from you. And it genuinely helps to have you here for the rest of it. Let's start with why more effort keeps failing to produce the satisfaction you're actually looking for. Here's the actual mechanism, and it explains something that probably feels deeply unfair. The harder you work toward a goal, the less capable your brain becomes of actually registering when you've reached it. Psychologists have a name for part of this: hedonic adaptation, the tendency for any achievement, any acquisition, any win, to lose its emotional charge almost as fast as it arrives, leaving you right back where you started, just with a slightly higher bar for what counts as enough next time. But there's a second piece that matters just as much, and it's less talked about. Most of us have never built a deliberate moment of recognition into our lives at all. We move from task to task, achievement to achievement, without ever consciously marking, "This is done, and it was enough." So even when satisfaction is technically available, there's no ritual catching it before the next demand crowds it out. I saw this with my client constantly. She'd finish a major project at work, and within an hour, she'd already be talking about the next one, as if the finished one had simply evaporated the moment it was done. It wasn't that she didn't care about her accomplishments. It's that nothing in her life ever asked her to actually stop and register them before moving on. Lagom, at its core, isn't really about restraint. It's about attention. Paying enough attention to a moment, a possession, an achievement, to actually notice when it's already sufficient, instead of letting your attention race straight past it toward the next target. Sit with that for a second, because I think a lot of you have spent years mistaking a full calendar for a full life, when really, busyness can be one of the most effective ways to avoid ever having to sit still long enough to ask whether any of it is actually landing. The shift here starts small. At the end of any task today, meaningful or not, pause for 10 seconds and consciously say to yourself, "That was enough." Not, "That was perfect." Not, "That could have been more." Just enough. It sounds almost too small to matter. It's the exact muscle most of us have never once trained. Now here's the two-step practice. The one my client actually used. The one that finally broke a pattern she'd been stuck in for years without a single grand gesture involved. Step 1. Before starting anything, a task, a purchase, an evening plan, name what enough would actually look like, out loud or on paper, before you begin. Not a maximum you're hoping to avoid exceeding out of guilt. A genuine, specific target for what would satisfy you. For my client, this meant, before every shopping trip, writing down exactly what she was going to buy and why, in one sentence, before she ever walked into a store. Not a rigid rule, a defined target. The reason this works is almost mechanical. Without a defined enough, your brain has no finish line to recognize, so it just keeps moving the goalpost by default every single time. Naming enough in advance gives satisfaction somewhere concrete to land. Step 2, and this is the piece that made the actual difference, a closing ritual, however small, that marks the moment something is genuinely finished. For my client, it was as simple as changing her shirt after finishing work for the day. Not because it was dirty, but because the physical act of changing became a signal her body learned to recognize. This chapter of the day is closed now, and it was enough. In Danish homes, this shows up constantly in small, almost invisible ways. Closing a book with both hands rather than just setting it down. Actually blowing out a candle instead of leaving it to burn low and forgotten. Small, deliberate closings, repeated daily. teaching the nervous system that done is a real, recognizable state, not just a pause before the next demand. We're close to putting this all together now. What's left is understanding why this reconnects effort to satisfaction specifically, and how small this practice needs to stay in order to actually survive contact with a real, busy life. Here's why these 2 steps actually work, and it comes back to the exact gap we started with. Effort and satisfaction were never disconnected because you weren't working hard enough. They were disconnected because nothing in your day was defining enough in advance, and nothing was marking its arrival when it showed up. Naming your target beforehand gives your brain something concrete to recognize. Closing the loop afterward gives that recognition somewhere to actually land, instead of dissolving instantly into the next task. Together, they do something no amount of additional effort ever could. They let satisfaction actually register on a timeline your nervous system can keep up with, instead of chasing a feeling that keeps sprinting one step ahead of you. I want to be honest about something, because I think it matters more than the technique itself. This isn't about doing less, and it was never really about your closet, or your calendar, or your to-do list specifically. Lagom doesn't ask you to want less. It asks you to actually notice what you already have, clearly enough to recognize when it's sufficient, which is a completely different skill than restraint, and, I'd argue, a much kinder one. My client didn't end up buying fewer things because she was told to. She ended up buying fewer things because she finally had a working system for noticing when she already had enough, instead of a vague guilt that never actually stopped the pattern on its own. Keep this small. That's genuinely the whole instruction. 1, enough, name before you start something today. 1 small closing ritual when it's actually finished. Not a life overhaul. Not a new productivity system stacked on top of the exhaustion you're already carrying. Just 2 small habits repeated daily until your nervous system starts trusting that arriving somewhere is actually allowed to feel like arriving. You don't need a bigger effort. You need a clearer finish line. One you actually let yourself cross instead of running straight past it toward the next thing, the way most of us have been doing for years without ever once deciding to. Tell me in the comments, is it the naming of enough beforehand or the closing ritual afterward that you're most likely to actually try this week? I read every single comment, and if you know someone who's exhausted from chasing a satisfaction that keeps staying one step ahead of them, send this to them. Sometimes the fix isn't doing more. It's finally being allowed to notice when enough already arrived. I know the objection that's probably forming right now, because my client raised the exact same one the first time I explained this to her. Isn't this just an excuse to stop pushing myself? Isn't enough just ambition dressed up in a nicer word? I want to take that seriously because it's a fair question, and the answer matters. Lagom was never about capping your ambition. It's about giving your ambition an actual destination instead of an infinite horizon. There's a real difference between chasing a specific, named target and running on a treadmill that never announces a finish line. My client didn't stop being ambitious after she started practicing this. She stopped confusing still working with still unsatisfied. 2 things that had quietly fused together in her mind until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She kept growing her career. She just stopped needing every single milestone to feel hollow the moment she reached it. This shows up well beyond closets and workdays, too, once you start looking for it. In relationships, it's the difference between constantly measuring whether you're giving or receiving enough against some invisible, shifting scale, versus actually naming out loud what enough connection looks like for you this week and letting yourself register it when it happens, instead of scanning endlessly for what's still missing. In rest, it's the difference between collapsing from exhaustion because you never gave yourself permission to stop earlier, versus naming before an evening even starts what would make it feel like enough rest, and actually closing the day once you've gotten there, rather than scrolling past the moment you already had what you needed. I think the hardest part of all this, honestly, isn't the 2 steps themselves. It's trusting that stopping at enough won't cost you something you're not ready to give up. That fear is real, and I don't want to pretend it isn't. But here's what I've watched over and over in home after home. The people who never let themselves register enough don't actually end up with more in any way that matters. They just end up more tired, chasing a feeling that was never going to arrive on its own, no matter how much they added to the pile. My client didn't lose her drive by practicing this. She got her drive back because it stopped being tangled up with an exhaustion that was never actually necessary in the first place. Lagom isn't the ceiling on your life. It's the moment, built in on purpose, where you're finally allowed to look at what you've built and actually let it count.